Charles and David Koch are two of the richest men in the world. Each one of them is worth tens of billions of dollars. Some of their money is inherited. Much of it they made themselves. But to their credit, the Kochs have never been content merely to get richer. They are engaged intellectuals. They have a sincere desire to change the world. So for years, the brothers have been the single most important funders of Republican politics in Washington, in the country. The Koch network of donors spends hundreds of millions of dollars every election cycle. Virtually every major conservative nonprofit in Washington takes Koch money, often a lot of it. Koch organizations train political organizers and candidates. Many Republican lawmakers owe their careers to the Kochs and are happy to say so. For people whose main business is making fertilizer and paper towels, the Kochs have been remarkably effective in American politics. And not surprisingly, the left hates them for it. Both the Koch brothers and their families, who, by the way, are very nice people, have been grotesquely and repeatedly maligned by the media. This, in turn, has convinced many conservatives that the Kochs must be on their side. Anyone who's been slandered by the New York Times has got to be doing something right. That's the idea. It's not a bad standard, but in this case, in the case of the Kochs, conservatives might want to pause and rethink the relationship. As it turns out, the Kochs don't have much in common with conservatives. They are, in fact, totally opposed to most conservative policy goals. The Kochs are libertarian ideologues. They're passionate and inflexible about what they believe. America first? The Kochs find the very notion of that absurd, if not fascist. An economic policy that seeks to strengthen families? The Kochs denounce that as, quote, crony capitalism or picking winners and losers. They think it's immoral, and they'll tell you so. Controlling our borders? The Kochs consider that racist. A few years ago, in fact, Bernie Sanders noted that the Koch brothers are far to the left of him on immigration. Open borders, quote, that's a Koch brothers proposal, Bernie Sanders said. And he was right. But in fact, it's more than a proposal. It's in effect what we have now in this country, open borders. And that's thanks in part to the Kochs. The overwhelming majority of Republicans want a secure border and less immigration. That's why they voted for Donald Trump. 2.5 years later, though, the border is more porous than ever. A tide of humanity is flooding in illegally. Republicans in Congress have done almost nothing to help with the situation. Why? Well, you can thank the Kochs for that. In 2018, Koch-backed organizations, the Freedom Network and Americans for Prosperity, pressured Republicans in Congress to use their limited post-election lame duck session to pass an amnesty for the so-called Dreamers. Going into this election, the 2020 race, amnesty remains the Kochs' top legislative priority. So if you're wondering why the Republican Party often seems completely out of sync with its own voters, this is why. And it's not just on immigration. The Koch network has also successfully pushed Republicans to join the left in going soft on crime. The Kochs aggressively backed the First Step Act, which is currently allowing drug traffickers to leave prison early. They support the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act that would cut required penalties for heroin and cocaine traffickers in half. Now, keep in mind, they're doing all of this in the middle of the deadliest drug epidemic in American history. The Kochs don't even bother to argue that these so-called reforms would help any law-abiding American in any way. They just believe it's the right thing, the libertarian thing to do. So they're pushing for it. On economics, meanwhile, you won't be surprised to learn that the Kochs hold views that bear no resemblance at all to what most Republican voters believe. The Kochs have pushed for cuts to Social Security and Medicare, for example. A vast majority of Americans are opposed to that. Most Republicans are opposed to that. Like almost everyone else, by the way, Republicans want lower drug prices. Drugs are expensive and getting more so. And yet the Kochs are working to kill a bill introduced by Senators Josh Hawley and Rick Scott that will prevent drug companies from charging Americans more than they charge the people of Canada or France. That seems like a fair idea to most people. The Kochs are preventing it from happening. Then the Kochs helped draft the 2017 tax cut. That turned out to be a far better deal for corporate America than it was for the American middle class. A majority of Republicans support capping interest rates on credit cards and payday loans. The Kochs think that idea is ridiculous. In fact, some years ago when David Koch ran for vice president as a libertarian, abolishing all usury laws was part of his platform. Now, there's nothing surprising about any of this or illegitimate. It's what many rich liberals believe. It's just not what most Republicans believe. And that's a problem, given that the Kochs are the single most powerful figures in the Republican Party. The Kochs don't seem interested in hearing you complain about that or anything else, actually. Remarkably, they have now joined the left-wing campaign against free speech in America. Next month, the Charles Koch Institute will hold a summit with the Anti-Defamation League and executives from major tech companies, including Pinterest, Airbnb, Patreon, Mozilla. The stated purpose of the meeting is to formulate, quote, best practices on the fight against hate and extremism online, end quote. But you know exactly what that really means. It means censorship of your views. For the left, fighting extremism always entails crushing normal conservatives. That's why Pinterest has censored live action. It's why Patreon banned Milo Yiannopoulos. It's why Mozilla drove out Brendan Eich for the crime of donating to the wrong political campaign. Big tech has become a far greater threat to your freedom than the federal government. The Kochs don't care about that. Nothing Google does violates libertarian orthodoxy. More to the point, the Kochs don't care about Republican voters or what happens to them. Okay, that's fine. No law requiring them to care. But then why are they running the Republican Party? That's a question Republicans should start asking themselves.